Hello, this is Scott at Blackberry Bog Farm, and we have about a 20-minute video of us building our first high tunnel in Brownsmead at Brownsmead Bog Farm. And we've got a lot of video showing us putting the plastic on. But what you're seeing now is some of the very initial stages with a lot of the pieces laid out. Here you're seeing the bottom board is in place and the legs are in place. And this is a 30 by 96 high tunnel that we built from a kit that we got from OBC, formerly known as Oregon Bag Company in Canby, Oregon. You can see our batter boards, I believe they're called, with the string, and that helps us to line everything up. Now, I like to put my bottom boards in. That's what you're seeing there in the pressure-treated lumber with grade stakes. And I like to put that in first after I have augured the holes for all the legs. And then I attach the legs to the bottom boards, and then I pour my concrete in the holes. That's the concrete in bags sitting on the trailer behind the pickup. You can see one post is laying kind of on its side, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I get my bottom board in place first, and then using pipe clamps that are provided with the kit. I get all my legs aligned. I use a laser level with a remote sensor to make sure that the tops of my legs are exactly the same height, plus or minus about 1/8 of an inch. Now, that was just showing some of the rafters laid out in place. They haven't been put together yet into the complete arches. The rafters that we get from the OBC kit come in just two pieces with a connector in between. Now, you can see that one leg is leaning in there, and there's one on the far side, on the right side, about halfway down. I hit stumps as I was augering the holes. I hit old buried stumps, and I couldn't put the legs down as deep as I wanted to in those two places. And so right now they're just sitting there. Now here you can see I've got that just jumped in there, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So we cut the bottom of that leg off. Now you can see the ribbon board is in place. That's that board that's about 4 feet above the ground. And we have some of our very first rafters in place. We did this at a 4-foot spacing between the legs, between the rafters, and we have a truss at every other rafter. So you'll see the end does not have a truss, and then the second rafter doesn't, and the third rafter does, the fifth rafter does, the seventh rafter does, on down the line. We used a bucket truck. Again, this is a 30 by 96 foot high tunnel. The peak is at about 16 feet high. It's actually about 16 feet on one end and about 17 feet on the other. On this end, closest to Fish Lane, the ground is a little bit higher. We built it level, but the ground is not level. The ground slopes away as it moves away from Fish Lane. So on the far end, farthest away from Fish Lane, we're actually about 17 feet to the peak, and we're about 16 feet to the peak on the end closest to Fish Lane. So Bonnie's dad, my father-in-law Danny, he came up and he helped put this all together. On the far side there is Andrew. I think that Bonnie's taken the video, and I'm out of the picture in the bucket on the bucket truck. The bucket works great for lifting those rafters up into place. Now we have the ribbon board all in place. It's drilled. The legs and the rafters are pre-drilled, but then we drill that ribbon board. You can see there that the bolts are in place. So as we're going along, all we have to do is slide that rafter down pull the bolt out, slide that rafter down into place, and then slip that bolt back through. Here you can see I'm taking the bucket up, and I'm going to lift that rafter up into place. Now that's been put together on a nice flat area next to the construction site. At first, we were putting the rafters up with the trusses in place, and we found that didn't work as well for us. So we just put the verticals of the truss arrangement in place, and we left the horizontals and we put those in later. We kind of learned as we go along. So here now we're lifting that rafter up into place. Pretty soon you'll see you'll pop that bolt out of there, and then they'll slide that down into place, and then put the bolt back through. It really does work well with 3 people. Now I'm told that my nephew in Virginia built one of these all by himself, one person. Good on him, but it would be a challenge to do this all alone. I'm not really quite sure. Oh, so here I think that Danny must have just had the bolt kind of sitting out a bit, kind of sitting in that ribbon board, and now he gets it down into place, and then he can just slide that bolt back through. So we didn't show you a whole bunch of, every rafter in between. In fact, you can see that everyone's changed clothes from the previous end. This was a 2-day process. We got partway along. We got purlins in place. Now, this particular high tunnel has 3 purlins. There's one on the ridge, and then there's one offset to each side by 4 feet, 8 feet. I don't remember what the dimensions are. It's all in the 35-page installation manual. Andrew's coming over. It is good to have some help sometimes to get those things lined up just right and get those bolts pushed through. You can see down there by Danny's right knee, there's one of the grade stakes that I use to put the ribbon bottom boards in place. And we kind of just left everything in place until we got everything all hooked together. I like having those ribbon boards all set up like that. So then once you get a rafter in place, you're not just hanging from one leg. You're hanging from, really the whole structure at that point. I think pretty soon here we're going to start seeing some pictures of the length of the high tunnel, and that'll show where the purlins go. Yep, there we go. So it's kind of hard to see. Oh, this is jumping ahead to channel in place, but there's a purlin that goes diagonally. That provides a lot of strength. And you can see we've got the ridge piece, and there you can see all 3 purlins. We've got the one right down the center, and then there's one on each side. And you can see the diagonals on the corners. Now we're starting to look at putting the plastic in place. Thank you very much to Trevor from High Climber Tree Service. He was here doing some work on some trees. And in the morning, the wind was just a little bit too strong out of the east. It wasn't too bad right at the ground, but by the time you got up 12, 14, 15 feet high, it was just a little too gusty. We're going to be putting that sheet of plastic that you see that's starting to work its way up over the high tunnel. That's 100 feet long, and I think it's 54 feet wide. Now, that's going to do the top, and it'll stop at the ribbon board on both sides, and then it will get cut, and then it'll get cut into 2 more long strips, and that'll become roll-up sides from the ribbon board down to the bottom board. This is something that takes a lot of people. I think we had 8 people on hand that day. You can see there's a string coming down that's baling twine, and kind of in a little pocket there in the plastic, that's actually a potato. You can use a rock, you can use a tennis ball. I happen to have potatoes. So we wrap that string around there, and we've got people on the other side. The strings are all up over the top, and we just kind of start working that plastic up. Now, it was a godsend to have that bucket truck. Don't know if we could have done it without the bucket truck. Now, on those 2 end rafters, we already have our channel in place for the wiggle wire. And so it's an aluminum channel, and then it's a stainless steel, spring steel wiggle wire, as we call it, that holds that plastic in place. So you can see that we're kind of starting to work that plastic up along the side. Now, we were pretty fortunate. The wind died about 11:30, and it just really, you can see there's still some luffing of that giant piece of plastic. It's like a giant sail, and that's why having 8 people there wasn't too many. 2 of us up in the bucket, and then you get about 3 on each side holding the plastic in place as it comes up, working the plastic up. That plastic probably weighs, I bet it weighs 100 pounds or more, that big sheet of plastic. So it's not like you're flipping a garbage bag around there. It's 6 mil, 4-year UV resistant greenhouse plastic. We got pretty lucky. It was a clear day, as you can see. It was in September, and we caught it right when the wind was shifting. The wind was out of the east early in the morning. At 11:30, we were out doing some other things. I think we were picking pumpkins, perhaps, and the wind just kind of died down. So we jumped on it. We had people available, and we got out there, and we got this plastic put up in about 2 hours. From 11:30 to 1:30. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the wind had shifted out of the west, and it was gusting pretty heavy to the point that if we hadn't finished it in that 2-hour period, we would have been in trouble. So we're just getting the plastic over the top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring that leading edge over to the ribbon board. That's the upper board that's about 4 feet high there. We're going to bring, and we already have channel installed on that ribbon board. So we're just getting that plastic worked over. If you work it too fast and too hard and pulling those strings too hard, you'll pull those rocks or potatoes or tennis balls right through the plastic. You just pull that plastic. So we're just very gradually working it up over, trying to get it into place. Now we try to use the fold marks that come with the plastic from the factory. We try to use those fold marks to help us to align the plastic, make sure it's square. So it's 100 feet long. The high tunnel is 96 feet long, so we're looking to have about 2 feet hanging over on each end. So we're taking the end that's closest to the wind, the windward edge, and we're tacking that down first. So we're just going to go up there with our bucket, and we're putting some wiggle wire in place and holding that in that channel along that top edge. We try to get the corners tacked down if we can. And then we kind of keep stretching it out from there. Now you can see as you're looking there, as we're doing this, you can see the rafters in there. The rafters have 3 verticals and then the 1 horizontal. That's where we hang our trellis system from. We plan on putting peppers and tomatoes in here in the spring for the 2024 crop. And our trellises will hang from that. Our trellises will be at about 7 feet above the ground. That's high enough that we can reach them from the ground with our trellis lines, but high enough that it gives us lots of room for growth. All that being said, by the middle or late June, the tomatoes will have reached the trellis, and that'll be a whole nother video on how we trellis our tomatoes. So that we, by the end of the season, have 15, 16, 17, even up to 20 feet of growth in each one of our tomato plants. And we can manage it in a high tunnel like this. So you can see Andrew's on the corner there, and he's kind of pulling it down. Trevor, again, from High Climber, he's up there in the bucket with me. We're kind of just stretching everything out. We're getting things tacked down on the corners so people don't have to hold it. I think it was Kyle that's down there on the lower left, and he's just kind of holding that down for all he's worth. He's got the hardest job down there. His side is towards the wind, and he's the guy who keeps getting that the wind tries to keep picking up off the ground. There you can see the wiggle wire in the channel. It's only about a foot, but that's enough to hold it in place while we continue up over the top, hooking things in place. So again, we're looking back up there. We're starting right at the peak. Now, we've done this many different ways. Sometimes we start on the side. Sometimes we start on the peak. It seems to work best for us to start on the peak towards the wind, and we try to stretch it as much as we can. Now, we try to do this on a nice warm day when the plastic is very stretchy. If you do it on a cold day, the plastic it contracts in the cold, and then when you do get a warm day the next summer, your plastic's pretty loose, pretty floppy, flops in the wind. So we always try to get it on a warm day. You can see here everybody's in shirt sleeves. It was probably 70-ish, high 60s, low 70s, so plenty warm. As soon as you get that plastic on there, inside, it starts warming up. And so then that heats the plastic. Plastic stretches nicely. I'm going to have to fill some time in the video because we still have several more minutes showing Trevor and I attaching the plastic here on this end. But you can see still as we go, there's some billowing in that plastic. A dead calm day is ideal. That's pretty hard to get, though, when you're a quarter mile from the Columbia River. Half a mile, I guess, from the river proper, but one of the sloughs, is right there. Andrew's running around with some duct tape in his hand. The wiggle wire, and it's always good to wave your arms around. That's an important part of any building project, is to wave your arms around in wide sweeping gestures. It helps to communicate ideas very effectively to the rest of the team. When we put the channel in, we forgot to cut the ends at a 45-degree angle. So then when we started putting this plastic in place up over the rafters, over the arches, I started poking holes in the plastic because we didn't have a nice shallow angle to it. We had a 90-degree angle. So Andrew was running around with some duct tape covering up those ends so we didn't put too many holes in the plastic until we had time to come back around and cut that. So now we're trying to line up this edge, this factory edge, get it stretched lengthwise, nice and taut, and then get it tacked down a few spots along the way evenly, so that then as we go up over the top again, we can make sure it's all square. It's easy to kind of lose perspective because of the arches. You're up above. It's very easy to kind of lose perspective on just how the plastic's laying, but it is really important to keep it square. The kit comes with plenty of plastic to do the roll-up sides and the over the top if you do it properly. We did one in 2020, so I guess it would have been 3 years ago, and we didn't do it properly, and we ended up short of plastic on one side, and that caused all kinds of hate and discontent. So here you're seeing the wiggle wire, the channel, and we don't have wiggle wire in there yet, but that's a channel. It bends very nicely. It's aluminum, and it bends very nicely. It just gets held in place up over the top with self-tapping screws. Hex head self-tapping screws, and so it just bends right up over the top, and then when you put that wiggle wire in, it just follows the contours of the rafter very nicely. The wiggle wire is not always the easiest stuff. It comes packed together in bundles of, I think, about 10 or a dozen, and you can kind of see it there. It does kind of get hooked in together. It can be difficult to get it separated. You always have to be careful when you're putting this wiggle wire in place. It's a great two-person job. So Trevor is there, and he's kind of holding the plastic for me, keeping some tension on that plastic as I put the wiggle wire in. You have to be careful also not to let the end of that wiggle wire poke a hole in the plastic. So you see Trevor, he's pulling down on the plastic. He's keeping some tension on it, keeping it nice and smooth. I go along. He's also controlling the position of the bucket. I go along, two-handed job, kind of moving that wiggle wire back and forth, and it just snaps into that channel. Andrew's holding the corner down, so he's keeping tension across the arch of the rafter, and so he's keeping tension in that direction. And we've got somebody down at the other end who's holding the plastic in place down in the far end. At this point, we've also got it tacked down in a few different places. The corner is always the hardest. The top does pretty good. Now, that being said, we did this end. We moved the truck down to the other end. We stretched it down that way, started at the peak, went both directions to the left and to the right. And then we came back to this end again and stretched it back this way. And we gained another 2 or 3 inches. But by that time, things were pretty well in hand. The wind had almost dropped to a dead calm, so we weren't worried about it flying away. We had it tacked down nicely. So we went down to the other end, then we came back up to this end and pulled it back, and then we went down and went along that ribbon board. So at this point, we got people kind of standing around a little bit because, well, things are tacked down, things are well in hand, and we're not quite ready to start putting the wiggle wire in along that ribbon board. That'll come pretty soon. Let's see, where are we now? So there looks like we've got the plastic maybe all in place now. Jumped ahead. Looks like Andrew's going up on that end, just check things out. Pretty soon here, we'll get the So we're still holding it down on the left side, so it looks like we haven't done the ribbon boards yet. At some point, though, we'll put that wiggle wire all along on the ribbon boards on both sides, and then we come through and we cut that bottom piece of plastic off, because we're going to then bring that back, and that's going to make our roll-up sides. So those sides are about 4.5, 5 feet tall, and they roll up with a hand crank, which now is on the end closest to us in the picture. And so as the weather changes, we can put those sides up and down. I know that the video moves along very quickly in the last minute or so here, so I'm kind of going to anticipate. You're going to see soon. There we go. You're seeing the side. Now here we're still working on getting those ends down. That's the other end looking from Fish Lane. But eventually we get all those sides down. We cut that excess plastic off. You're going to see that then we build our ends. There we go. We've got that. We don't have sides. So we build our ends there out of double wall polycarbonate and barn doors. And that's a picture there of it done. Thanks for watching. Bye.